For the next part of lesson 4.5, we look at another idea of interest, but this time it's called compounded interest. And compound interest is this idea that you're compounding the money on itself, which again, we'll take a look at this, meaning that we're going to, instead of compounding once a year, we can do it 4 times, 12 times, daily, weekly. And so what comes with that is a different equation. And so here's an example, $1,000 for 2 years interest rate while compounding monthly. So this putting interest on your money per month and then doing interest on your accumulated value and what you have already. And so looking at your principal, your rate, your term, your compounding each period, you see there's an equation we end up using here. Notice what happens is whatever the interest rate, in this case, we're doing it monthly, so that's 12 times a year. And so we divide that yearly rate, 2.4% a year, divided by 12. And so what happens is you do that for 1 month. And then for 2 months, notice where we're doing the same thing, dividing that by 12, but you're multiplying it with itself again. And so you can see we follow that pattern. And if you're going to continue with 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, you can see what it ends up happening in our pattern here. You end up squaring this value, which is 1.002 when you calculate this. So notice this here, this value there is 1.002. And so that gets squared for 3 months cubed, 6 months to the 6. And so notice there's this shortcut. And notice how much money we have. We're compounding our money. So this type of calculation is called compound interest. There's a general formula we use that comes as a result of these kind of calculations here. It's A equals P, parentheses 1 plus RT raised to the power of NT. P is your principal, A is your future value, R is your interest rate, T is the time, which is months, years, depends upon what the term is, and then N is the number of times you're compounding your money. And so you can see where those numbers come from. So looking at another example here, let's say that 2% that pays to one that pays 4%, and so you'll end up, look, here's your 2%, comparing it to the 4%. We're using P equals 1,000 to compare them. And so we'd be using this equation here, but notice the difference. Again, compounded, this is annually compounded when we do that. So you can see how this, how that grows compared to 2% and 4%. And so looking at some problems here, you invest 100, 5% compound annually. What is the compounds after 3 years? Notice here's our numbers here. Here's the equation. And this is your number after 3 years and then after 10 years. Notice how I plug those numbers in. There's your 3 and there's your 10. And so we're compounding our money. And so we're just doing different examples here. Compounded quarterly 4 times a year. So you see how we end up dividing by 4. And we're just substituting in to see where your numbers are, what the values are. Again, another situation here, future value 700. This is, again, one a little bit harder one, so that you have to solve an equation. You want your future value to be 700. You plug in everything in, and you end up with this over here once you simplify and plug this into the calculator. Then you're going to solve for your principal. So $419 turns into 700. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, in 13 years at 4% compounded twice a year. Again, just different examples here. And then looking at this last one here, you can see your situation, total interest earned at the end of 20 years. Here's a simple interest one, compounded annually. You can see how much interest, again, we're calculating interest, so once we calculate the total value, I subtract that original deposit of $30,000. Oh, in this case, sorry, this should be $6,000 in interest. No, this is 36,000. Sorry, 36,000 because I equals PRT. Here we end up with 66,000 compounded annually. Compounded quarterly, you end up with 68,000. Again, after this is your total, you subtract out what you deposit. Compounded monthly, you end up with 69. So you can see it's not that much of a difference between monthly, quarterly, annually. But it is more the more you can compound your money. And that's compound interest.